Imagine traveling back 30,000 years. You wake up before sunrise. There are no weather apps, no television forecast, no radar maps, no satellites orbiting above you. Nobody is standing in front of a screen telling you that rain is coming in 3 hours. And yet, you still need to know. Because when your entire life depends on the environment around you, knowing what the sky is about to do can mean the difference between a normal day and a very bad one. Rain might mean fresh water. It might mean better hunting. It might mean new plants appearing. But it could also mean a freezing night, a flooded shelter, a ruined fire, or a dangerous river that suddenly becomes impossible to cross. So how did ancient humans know when rain was coming? Did they simply look at the clouds? Or did they understand something much more complicated? The answer is they probably noticed far more than we realize. Imagine an ancient human standing outside his shelter. He looks toward the horizon. The sky isn't blue anymore. A dark layer of clouds is slowly moving across the landscape. He doesn't have a word for atmospheric pressure. He doesn't understand meteorology. He doesn't know what a weather front is. But he has seen this before, many times. And that's important. Because ancient humans didn't need to understand why something happened to recognize that it was about to happen. Think about how you recognize rain today. You might notice dark clouds. Maybe the air feels different. Maybe you hear thunder. Maybe the wind suddenly changes. You don't need a scientific explanation. You simply recognize the pattern. Ancient humans could have done the same thing, except they were watching the environment much more closely, because they had to. Imagine sitting near a fire. The smoke is moving in one direction. Then suddenly the wind changes. The air becomes cooler. Leaves begin moving differently. Dust starts traveling across the ground. You might not know exactly what is happening, but something has changed. And sometimes those changes happen before the rain. Ancient humans could have learned to associate certain wind patterns with approaching storms, especially if those patterns repeated season after season. And there was another clue that modern humans often forget about: smell. Have you ever noticed that the air smells different before or after rain? There is a reason for that. Rain interacts with soil, plants, and organic material. The air can carry smells that become more noticeable when conditions change. An ancient human living directly in the environment would have been surrounded by these smells. There were no sealed houses, no air conditioning, no traffic, no artificial fragrances everywhere. The smell of the landscape was part of everyday life. So changes in that smell could become useful information. Maybe the earth suddenly smelled stronger. Maybe plants became more fragrant. Maybe the air carried the smell of wet soil from somewhere nearby. A modern person might barely notice. An ancient human could have learned that it meant something. But perhaps one of the most interesting clues came from animals. Animals react to changes in their environment. Birds can change their behavior before storms. Insects can become more or less active. Some animals seek shelter. Others change where they feed. And ancient humans were constantly watching animals, not because they were studying them for science, but because animals were food, or competition, or danger. If the animals suddenly behaved differently, you paid attention. Imagine you're tracking a group of animals. Everything has been normal. Then suddenly, the birds disappear from the sky. Insects become strangely quiet. The animals you're following begin moving towards shelter. You don't know why, but you've seen it before, and the last time this happened, a storm arrived. That could become a warning. And this is where ancient knowledge becomes fascinating. A person didn't need to say, rain is coming because atmospheric conditions are changing. They could simply think, when the animals do this, rain usually follows. That is still prediction. It just isn't written in a weather report. Plants could provide clues too. Many plants respond to changes in humidity, temperature, sunlight, and moisture. Flowers can close. Leaves can change position. Certain plants become more active under particular conditions. Ancient humans who depended heavily on plants for food would have had countless opportunities to notice these patterns. They knew their environment because their environment was their supermarket, their pharmacy, their calendar, their map, and their weather station. But there is something even more important: the season. Ancient humans didn't experience weather as random events. They lived through repeating cycles: wet seasons, dry seasons, cold periods, warm periods, changes in animal migrations, changes in plant growth, changes in water availability. If you live in the same region for years, you start learning what normally happens at different times of the year. Maybe the first heavy clouds usually appear after a certain period of heat. Maybe certain birds arrive before the rains. Maybe a particular plant starts flowering shortly before the wet season. Maybe rivers become fuller after distant storms. These weren't random details. They formed a natural calendar. And unlike our calendars, this one was alive. You could see it, hear it, smell it, and sometimes feel it. Think about temperature. Before a storm, the air can change dramatically. The sun disappears behind clouds. Wind increases. Cooler air moves into the area. The atmosphere suddenly feels different. An ancient human couldn't measure the temperature with a thermometer, but they had skin, and their skin was constantly measuring the world. They could feel when the air became cooler. They could feel when humidity increased. They could feel when a dry breeze became damp. And after enough experience, those sensations became meaningful. Maybe the last time the air felt like this, rain arrived. So when the same feeling returned, you paid attention. And then there was thunder. This one seems obvious. If you hear thunder, rain may already be close. But thunder could also provide information before the storm actually reached you. You might hear a distant rumble long before the rain arrived. You could see lightning on the horizon. You could watch a storm moving across the landscape. And because sound travels differently from light, you could even get clues about how far away the storm was. Of course, ancient humans didn't calculate the exact distance. They didn't need to. They simply knew that distant thunder meant something was happening somewhere beyond the horizon. And if the clouds were moving toward them, they could prepare. This brings us to one of the biggest advantages ancient humans had. They had time to observe, not because life was easy. It wasn't. But their attention was connected directly to survival. Imagine living without electricity. There are no screens glowing at night, no notifications, no endless stream of videos, no artificial information coming from thousands of miles away. Your attention is much more connected to the physical world. You notice the wind. You notice the clouds. You notice the stars. You notice animals. You notice changes in temperature. You notice sounds in the distance. Modern humans receive information from everywhere. Ancient humans received information from their surroundings, and that made the environment incredibly important. But there is another factor that made their predictions better over time: memory. Imagine you're 20 years old. You've experienced 20 rainy seasons. You remember what the sky looked like before certain storms. You remember how the wind felt. You remember which animals changed their behavior. You remember what plants appeared afterward. Now imagine another 20 years, and another, and another. Eventually, the landscape becomes a giant library stored inside your memory. You don't need written books. You have experience. A particular cloud formation might remind you of a storm from years ago. A certain wind might tell you that the dry season is ending. A certain bird might signal that something is changing. And this knowledge could be passed to other people. A parent could teach a child. An experienced hunter could teach a younger hunter. An elder could remember patterns that younger people had never experienced. Suddenly, the group had a shared understanding of the environment, and that knowledge could become incredibly valuable. Imagine a group preparing to travel. Someone looks at the horizon. The sky is changing. One person wants to continue. Another person says they should wait. Why? Because they remember what happened the last time the sky looked like this. Maybe the storm caused a river to rise. Maybe the path became impossible to cross. Maybe the rain lasted for hours. The group doesn't need a meteorologist. It needs someone who remembers. And that may be one of the reasons humans became so good at reading environmental signals. Our survival depended on it. But there is an important distinction. Ancient humans weren't predicting rain perfectly. They couldn't. Weather is complicated. Sometimes dark clouds produce nothing. Sometimes storms appear unexpectedly. Sometimes the air feels strange and nothing happens. A prediction can be wrong, and ancient humans would have learned that too. They would have discovered which signs were reliable and which ones weren't. Over thousands of generations, small observations could accumulate into enormous amounts of practical knowledge. This is how traditional weather knowledge could develop, not from equations, but from repeated experience. Observe something. Wait. See what happens. Remember it. Notice it again. Compare the outcomes. And slowly, a pattern emerges. In a way, this is an ancient form of experimentation, not laboratory science, but observation. And humans are exceptionally good at it, especially when the information matters. Today, we have machines that can do something far more precise. Satellites watch massive weather systems from space. Radar can track precipitation. Weather stations measure temperature, pressure, humidity, and wind. Computers combine enormous amounts of information to create forecasts. We can sometimes know about a storm before it is anywhere near us. An ancient human had none of this, but they had something different. They were physically inside the system they were trying to understand. They could feel the wind changing, see the clouds building, hear distant thunder, watch animals react, smell the air, feel the temperature, and remember what happened last time. So if you somehow transported an ancient human into the modern world, they might be completely confused by a weather app, but they would probably understand the sky. Because the sky hasn't changed that much. Clouds still gather, wind still moves, thunder still rolls across the horizon. Animals still react to storms, plants still respond to moisture, the smell of rain still reaches the ground, and humans still look upward when the weather changes. The biggest difference is that today we have thousands of years of accumulated knowledge plus technology. But the instinct to look at the sky came much earlier, long before satellites, long before thermometers, long before weather forecasts. An ancient human could stand outside their shelter, look toward the horizon, feel the wind, watch the clouds, and make a decision. Maybe the rain was coming, maybe it wasn't. But either way, they were reading the world around them. And that ability may have been more important than we realize. Because predicting rain wasn't just about staying dry. It could tell you when rivers might rise, when plants might grow, when animals might move, when water would become available, when travel would become dangerous, and when it might be better to stay close to shelter. For ancient humans, the weather wasn't something you checked in the morning. It was something you lived inside, every day, every season, every year. And perhaps that's why they became so good at noticing tiny changes that modern humans often ignore. A darker horizon, a different wind, a sudden silence, a strange smell, a change in animal behavior, a drop in temperature. None of these things could guarantee rain, but together they could tell a story. And the more often humans watched that story unfold, the better they became at recognizing what came next. So the next time your phone tells you that rain is coming, remember how strange that would have seemed to someone living 30,000 years ago. You don't have to look at the clouds. You don't have to feel the wind. You don't have to watch the animals. You don't even have to step outside. You can simply look at a tiny screen and get the answer. But thousands of years ago, the answer was all around you, in the sky, in the wind, in the plants, in the animals, in the smell of the earth, and in the memory of everyone who had watched the same landscape before you. Ancient humans didn't have weather forecasts. They had something much older. They had the ability to observe, and sometimes that was enough to see the rain coming.